Alright everyone, we're doing one of my favorite things today, which is yapping about coloring. And specifically what I'm going to be yapping about is every coloring supply in my collection. And then I also wanted to show you an example of my favorite way to use each of these supplies, so you can decide if this is a supply that you want to add to your own coloring toolkit. I am keeping this video specifically related to supplies rather than tools. However, if you would like to see all the coloring tools that I own, definitely let me know in the comments below and I'll somehow incorporate it into a future video. If any of the supplies that I show you today are available on Amazon, I'll make sure that they're linked in my storefronts in the description below. There's absolutely no pressure to shop through those links, but it is a small way you can support the channel whilst also treating yourself to some coloring goodies. So I'm going to be sharing all the products today in fairly loose categories, and the first one is a category that's very important to me as a predominantly pencil colorist, and that is colored pencils. So this is my current colored pencil collection. This is the only category where I won't tell you my favorite way to use each set here because they're all standard coloring pencils. I pretty much use them all the exact same way. So instead I thought it might be more helpful to share what books I like to use each pencil set with the most. I feel like I did not word that correctly. My favorite books to use each pencil set with. Oh my lord! Which books I like to color the most with each pencil set. That was worded horribly, but you understand what I'm trying to say, I hope. So let's start with my very first pencil set that I ever owned as an adult, and that is the Brute Funers. I've spoken about this before. I'm not sure if these are legitimate Brute Funers because they came in a package that said something differently, but then the barrel says Brute Funer, yada yada yada. Regardless, this was my first pencil set and they suited me really well for the first 6 months of my coloring. I also keep my 72 set of Brute Funer macarons in this pencil case as well. I find that the Brute Funers work in most coloring books, but I found that they worked really well in my Eerie coloring book, as well as any of my Rita Berman books. The next set of pencils I ever owned were then my Artex colored pencils. This is the full set, the 126 set. Some people say they're a good dupe for Prismacolors. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. I think they are quite a bit harder than the Prismacolors, but even so, I think they are a great option for anyone who wants maybe something kind of in the mid-range, I suppose, in regards to quality and price point. And I love using my Artex in any of Lulu Mayo's books, as well as Melpomene Chetzepenegyotu's books. I find they work really well on smoother paper. I've also tried them in Amazon coloring books, and I really like them in that lesser quality paper book as well. The third set of pencils that I ever added to my collection are the Holy Grail Prismacolors. I feel like there's a lot of people out there who have quite strong opinions about the Prismacolors. Some people love them, some people hate them, and I'm kind of in the middle of the two roads. My main qualm with the Prismacolors is just how easily they break. It does frustrate me a little, and how frequently I have to keep sharpening them during the coloring process. However, these are just such a pigmented and soft and creamy pencil that's smooshed together so well on the page. And so I'm willing to overlook that continuously sharpening and easily breakable issue that I have with them. I find that the Prismacolors work in a majority of coloring books and paper qualities. The only ones I've had a major issue with are Fairy Tales and Folklore by Emily Lederhall Oberg, and also Eerie's coloring book as well. We then have the 100 set of Crayolas that I purchased for my 8-hour Crayola coloring challenge. I really struggled with these pencils. They're definitely probably the worst quality out of all of the pencil sets that I own. They're just an extremely hard pencil, and they're not super duper pigmented. However, since that coloring challenge, because someone actually recommended to me in the comments section that I try them in Lulu Mayo's books, and I actually really enjoyed my experience using these pencils in Lulu Mayo's. So I think these are going to be the pencils that I exclusively use in her books. And then we have the two colored pencil sets that I've spoken about a lot recently on the channel, the Ohuhu Halawa oil-based colored pencils. This is the full 72 set. We know I'm slowly getting used to oil-based pencils and figuring out the correct technique to use with them. And then in comparison, we have the 120 set of polychromos here. This is a very bougie and expensive set of pencils. I'm still getting used to these ones as well, and so I haven't used them in a whole heap of coloring books yet. I do really need to try them in fairy tales and folklore because people have said that the polychromos work really well in that book. But so far I've used them in a Christine Karen coloring book as well as in a Johanna Basford book, and they seem to work really well in both of those. The next category we're moving on to is alcohol markers. I currently have 3 different sets of alcohol markers and they are all by Ohuhu. This is the largest set of alcohol markers that I own from Ohuhu. This is an 120 set. I always get confused by all the different names of the sets, but these are basically dual-ended, and on one side it has a brush tip and then on the other side is the chisel tip. And then the other 2 sets that I have here, which I initially borrowed from my mother and then just took full custody of, we have the 48 set of pastel alcohol markers and then the 36 set of skin tone. These are also dual-ended. One side is a brush tip, but then these are slightly different from the other set that I own, and they have the fine tip on the other side. I definitely use the fine tip more when trying to get into those tiny little spaces in some of my coloring books. Now I'm going to share 2 of my favorite ways for using alcohol markers, and my first is going to be no surprise to loyal viewers of the channel, and that is for basing my pages. Obviously I can only do this in a single-sided coloring books, but I just find when I base a page with my alcohol markers, the end result is always so much more vibrant and saturated. So an example I wanted to show you is from a completed page in Enchanted Earth by Melpomene Chetspanyagiotu, and the specific page I'm going to show you today is this pumpkin one, which I actually followed a color along from Shell's Coloring Journeys channel. And one of the great things about basing with alcohol markers and then shading over the top with colored pencils is that you can get some really fun color combinations without the risk of having muddy blends. So a good example is for the leaves of this pumpkin. I've done a base of light yellow, and then over the top I've used different greens and oranges. And because the alcohol marker base doesn't get affected by colored pencils over the top, there's no issues of the colors blending together to make gross browns or grays or anything like that. And then my second favorite way to use alcohol markers is actually for coloring portraits. One of my favorite portraits that I've done with alcohol markers is this page here from Julia Speary. This is the Phoenix Keeper Fairy. I did use a tiny bit of pencil, but for the most part, this entire page was colored with alcohol markers, and I think they can just create a really gorgeous blend for portraits. Not to mention that coloring a portrait with alcohol markers over colored pencil, it was exponentially faster. The next category we're going to be moving on to is acrylic markers, and I don't know what it is about acrylic markers, but I just absolutely love them. I'm a bit of an acrylic marker fiend, and so I have lots and lots of sets of them. Let's first chat about all my brush acrylic markers because I like to use them all in the same way. These were the first 2 brush acrylic marker sets that I ever owned. These are both from Artex. This is the 60A set, and then we also have the 60B set. These are definitely the 2 sets that I reach for the least in my color coloring toolkit just because they are on the more translucent side. However, that definitely has a time and a place, which we'll talk about in a second. We then have the Artex Simp Tap markers. I have the 48 set. I believe you can get a larger set now. And these have a much stronger coverage to the previous two sets that I just showed you because they actually have like a little button on the back of the pen, which releases more ink from the barrel so you can get that stronger opaque finish. We then have the largest set of acrylic markers that I own. This is the 72 set from Artex, and these have the option to have the 3mm bullet tip as well as a brush tip. So it comes with interchangeable nibs. The only thing I wish Artex had done with this set is provide enough brush nibs so you could have a full brush acrylic marker set for all the 72 colors. You can wash the different nibs and switch them around depending on what color you want, but that's just me being lazy, wishing I could just have all of them as brush nibs. And then the final brush acrylic marker set that I own is from Ohuhu. This is their 24 set, and I'll definitely say that the Ohuhu brand of acrylic markers are the most opaque I've ever tried. Now, I yet again have two favorite ways that I love to use brush acrylic markers in my coloring pages, and the first way is for multicolored accents. The best example I can show you is a page that I did in Boule de Pois by Diane Dufour. It is this adorable cat pumpkin page that I colored last year for Halloween, and you can see the multicolored accents that I did with my brush acrylic markers on the pumpkins here. I've used a mixture of pink, green and yellow, and I found that just using those more unusual colors just really amps up the fantastical and whimsical vibes of the page. And then my second favorite way to use my brush acrylic markers is for translucent / smoky effects. This is when the 60A and 60B set of Artex markers definitely come in handy. And the example page I have to show you is from Year of Witches. I colored this recently on the channel, and you can see that translucent smoky effect with these little steam cats coming out of the witches' drinks here. It is honestly such an easy technique to do, but is always super effective in the end result. The other set of acrylic markers that I own that don't fall within the brush category are this 48 set of Ohuhu acrylic markers. Even though this is a 48 set, you only get 24 colors in total because you get a fine tip option in each color and also a broad tip option in each color. When I tried the white acrylic marker in this set, I was blown away with the opacity. I've never been able to find a marker with such a fine tip as well as such opacity before. It's finally gotten to the stage though where that white acrylic marker is on its last legs, and I'm not gonna buy another set of 48 markers just so I can have that one white fine tip option. So the search for the perfect white fine tip acrylic marker that's available open stock is still ongoing, but because this set of acrylic markers is so opaque in its formulation, my favorite way to use them is for covering the line work in my coloring pages. And the best example I can show you of me covering the line work in my pages, especially with that white acrylic marker, is in Dream Voyage by Melpomene Csikszentmihalyi. I covered a majority of the line work in this illustration with that white marker just to really amp up that sort of icy, frosty vibe. And as you can see, it's covered that black line work really well. And this page definitely contributed to the fact that my white marker is running out. And the final acrylic marker that I have to show you in this category is the classic 0.7mm white Posca paint pen. It is not super duper opaque, but I can find that I get the opacity that I like by doing several layers. It just takes a little bit of time. And actually what I love using this Posca paint pen for is for covering the line work and then coloring over the top of that with a colored pencil. The best example I have to show you of this is from the double page spread that I did in Magical magical jungle this year. I don't know how well you're going to be able to pick it up on camera, but for a majority of the elements on this page, I've covered the line work in sort of the highlight areas of each element using the Posca paint pen, and then I've colored over the top of that with, I think I used my Prismacolors on this page, and that just gives those sort of highlight sections a more subtle look. We are now moving on to the next category, which is water-soluble mediums. Let's first chat about my 72 set of Artex watercolor pencils. These definitely get quite a bit of use in my double-sided coloring books. I base my pages 99% of the time, so when I'm not basing with my alcohol markers, I'm basing with these. They're not a super pigmented watercolor pencil, but I actually really like that because I don't want too much pigment for that base layer, you know? I'm going for a light wash of color, mainly just to cover the tooth of the paper and also just help me figure out my color placement on the page. And I think one of the best examples I can show you of this is a page that I did recently in A Million Magical Creatures by Lulu Mayo, and I found the basing particularly helpful here for the gradient in the background. I was able to create a super smooth blend with the watercolors first, and then just make it look a little bit more vibrant and pigmented with my colored pencils. We then have the 72 set of Derwent Inktense pencils. Oh, these are such an amazing supply. They don't look like much when you first lay them down on the page, but then as soon as you activate them with water, oh my goodness, that's when all the saturation and pigmentation comes out to play. What my favorite way to use the Derwent Inktense for is for a stippled, faded out background. And so the example I wanted to show you is from Forest and Nature by Rada Prince. It is for this page here. I did color this on the channel if you want to see the entire process, but this is what I mean by this kind of faded, stippled background. This was achieved by doing a whole bunch of different layers. I also created this sort of galaxy sky situation in the back of the suitcase here using the Derwent Inktense, and that was another great way that I loved using these pencils. We then have a product that I absolutely love for creating backgrounds in my coloring pages, and that is the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s. Holy moly, do I love these so much. I rave about them all the time on the channel. I just love how they layer in my pages and how easily the pigment breaks down on the page when you activate them with water. And you can create quite a smooth gradient with these pastels, but my favorite way to use them is it's in a very dappled, messy watercolor style. And the best example I have to show you is from a page that I did in Spooky by Sarah Shefchick. This background was inspired by Nolly's World on Instagram, so definitely check their page out. Just look at the way the neocolors have blended together on the page. It's just such a fun, messy, and creative way to use the neocolors. And if I wasn't so obsessed with pushing myself out of my comfort zone and trying new things in my coloring pages, I probably would use the Neocolor 2s for all of my backgrounds. We then have my 52 set of Mei Liang watercolors, and I've had such a love-hate relationship with my watercolors. They really are such a temperamental medium, but my favorite way to use watercolors is actually with stencils for my backgrounds. I'm yet again going to show you another page from Spooky by Sarah Shefchick. I have a tutorial for this background on the channel if you're interested in watching it. I mean, technically I didn't use a stencil here. I actually used a cookie cutter, a love heart cookie cutter, and that's what helped create this very fun, messy love heart background. And whilst we're on the subject of watercolors, I'll quickly mention this product that I have. This is the Winsor & Newton Art Masking Fluid. And masking fluid and me, we don't get along. I've had more fails than I have success with masking fluid, and so I generally try to stick away from it as much as I can, but I just can't get the consistency and the drying time correct. One day we'll get there, team. One day we'll get there. And then the final product we're going to talk about in this category, which isn't technically a water-soluble medium, but these are water-based markers. They're the Holy Grail Crayola Super Tips. Now I have used these to do basing in my coloring pages, but my favorite way to use them is actually by scribbling the marker onto a palette using a water brush to kind of dilute that pigment and then apply it onto the page almost like watercolors. You can see how I did that in the same Crayola coloring challenge that I was talking about earlier in this video. And this is also the page that I colored in that video from Vibrant Wilds by Sarah Renee Clark. And yes, as you can see, this very messy watercolor style background is done with the Crayola Super Tips. It was just a really fun and unconventional way to use the markers. And whilst we're talking about that Crayola challenge and this page in particular, I might as well talk about the 24 set of Crayola crayons that I bought for that challenge. I have not used them since, but I use these to do all the kind of doodly accents in the background here, those sort of multicolored dots, circles, lines, crosses, all that jazz. I really should use these a little bit more because I think they add a nice visual texture to this page. The next category is one that I've started to delve into a little bit more recently, and that is gel pens. If you're up to date with my videos, you'll know that I recently got the very hyped up product in the coloring world at the moment, and that is the Languo gel pens. I ended up purchasing this 99 set here that came in a storage case. The first time I showed these in a video, someone commented that this storage case gets annoying very quickly, and yes, I have experienced that issue, so I probably will eventually transfer these to some sort of case because this storage situation here, it's very cheaply made and they're really hard to line up all the different trays. However, I do love how fine the tip is on these gel pens. They really are such a great option when I'm adding super fine details to my coloring pages, which is my favorite way to use them. I love using them to create super tiny dot details in my coloring pages. So the example I have to show you of that is yet again a page that I've done recently on the channel. You would have seen me finish this page off in my recent 9-hour coloring challenge, and it's from World Legends by Erie. And so you'll see all those super tiny Languo gel pen details on a lot of the elements actually. And I've used a mixture of the Languo colors here as well. And I find that just adds a little bit more, I don't know, variety and visual interest to the page rather than just say using a standard white acrylic marker for all of those dot details. I then keep all my other gel pens in this, I believe it's called a studio caddy, along with my paint brushes. The gel pens I have in here, firstly are the Pentel Dual Hybrid Metallic gel pens. Oh my goodness, I wish that title wasn't so long. I have very much a love-hate relationship with these gel pens, mainly because of the dual aspect. A lot of the colors don't look like how they actually appear in the barrel, but I do really love the gold and the silver gel pens within this set. They are so shimmery on the pages. And then the other sort of glitter gel pens that I own, which I definitely want to own the full set at some point because I really love the formulation of these. They are the Uniball Signo, I think they are the sparkling gel pens. I currently only own the pink and the orange, but yes, like I said, I want to eventually get the full set. And so my favorite way to use any sort of glitter gel pen is for those super tiny elements in my coloring pages where there's no room to do any sort of shading or blending. Particularly in my Johanna Basford books, that's definitely where my glitter gel pens come out to play. And so an example I have to show you is from Worlds of Wonder by Johanna Basford. It is this swan page here. There are lots of glitter accents on this page. I'll try to show them to the best of my ability on camera, but it's really hard to pick up glitter gel pens in film footage. But I've got blue glitter gel pen accents on this page, I've got orange accents, and I've also got gold. It's just such a fun way to add a little bit of pizzazz to your pages and makes my inner child very happy. The final gel pen I have to show you is also a Uniball Signo gel pen, and that is just the standard white one. I feel like the white Uniball Signo is a very common gel pen in a lot of colorists' toolkits, and my favorite way to use this gel pen is for reducing the appearance of the line work in my coloring pages. So the example I'm going to show you is from Tales from the Witch's Cottage by Hannah Carlson, and I use the white Signo gel pen a lot on this page here, so you'll definitely be able to see it on the little stars on this frog's party hat here. I've also done it on some of the edges of this leaf element. You'll be able to see it on sort of, I guess, the chin line work of the witch. And I also actually use the Signo gel pen to add just a few little white flicks into the witch's hair as well. Alright everyone, we've made it to the last category of this video, which is the miscellaneous category. This is a bunch of supplies that I couldn't really find a category for. So first off, I'm going to talk about the Paul Rubens 72 set of higher oil pastels. I used these in one video on the channel and I have not used them since. I do think they are a great medium and these are a great oil pastel product. I just find that they are so incredibly messy. That's generally why I steer clear from them. However, my favorite way that I used these oil pastels that I really do need to do again because I loved the effect, and that was for creating clouds. So the one time I've done that is in Maria Troll's Universe by Maria Troll, and it was for this page here, but the oil pastels really do create this really nice, soft, subtle, semi-realistic painterly effect. And I do love how the water reflection came together with the oil pastels as well. You're gonna see that page again in just a second for another product, but I also wanted to quickly talk about what I used to set the oil pastels in place, because obviously it's a very transferable medium and I don't want it getting all over my other coloring pages, especially in my double-sided coloring books. And so what I used to set the oil pastels in my pages is this Liquitex matte acrylic medium. I know this isn't what acrylic medium is supposed to be used for, but it worked for me and what I needed it to do. We then have another pastel product. These are the Lightwish soft pastels. This is a 72 set, but there's technically only 70 colors because there's a duplicate of the white and the black. And I've definitely used these more than I have the oil pastels, but they're still a medium that I don't gravitate towards super often because they are quite messy as well. And my favorite way I've ever used these soft pastels that I actually forgot about until planning for this video, so I'll definitely have to try this again soon, and that is to create a galaxy background. So I did this in Year of Witches by Usuku, but yeah, I was surprisingly so shocked with how easy it was to create a galaxy background with the soft pastels, and especially on Amazon quality paper as well. It still worked really, really well. And then what I used to set the soft pastel work in my coloring pages, and also just to set my coloring pages in general, is the Micador Workable Matte Fixative Spray. I'm pretty sure you can only get this in Australia, but I'm sure there's many similar options wherever you live. This is just to keep everything set and in place, stop it from transferring to the opposite page, and yeah, I'll probably need to actually purchase some more of that soon because it's running a little bit low. We then have some fine liners. These are the Ohuhu Fine Line Drawing Pens. This is an 8-pack. This pack comes with a variety of fine line thicknesses, and what I love about these fine liners is that they are waterproof, fade resistant, quick dry, and they do not smear as well. So I predominantly use these when I want to add elements to my pages, you know, add my own little illustrative details. And so I'll sketch out whatever I want to add and then go over the top of that sketch line work with these fine liners. And a great example I can show you of this is actually a color along that I did on the channel for Christmas last year. This is Johanna's Christmas by Johanna Basford. I added in the Christmas trees in the background here. These weren't added previously. I sketched them in and then just used the fine liners to make them look like they were always part of the illustration. And then the final products I have to show you in this video is this miscellaneous tray of Montmartre paints. Montmartre is kind of like our budget brand here in Australia. It's the art brand you'll most commonly find in all of our kind of discount stores. And so in this tray here, I've got a mix of gouache paints, acrylic paint, and then I also have this random sort of like silver iridescent paint here. I don't reach for these very frequently at all, but my favorite way to use the acrylic paints here is for creating splatters in my pages. So an example I wanted to show you is from Fairy Tales and Folklore by Emily Lederhall Oberg. The background was done with Neocolor 2s, and then over the top I've just done some splatters with white acrylic paint as well as that silver iridescent paint that I showed you before. I really do love adding splatter details to my coloring pages. I don't necessarily always use acrylic paint. Sometimes I'll use watercolors, neocolors, anything that is splatterable. I just find that splatters add a really fun, free, artistic quality to my pages. And then to show you my favorite way I've used gouache in the past is yet again from this page in Maria Troll's universe. And what I did for this page for every aspect that wasn't done with oil pastels is actually did a base with the white gouache, and that's supposed to diminish the line work, pretty much make it invisible, and then colored over the top with my Prismacolors to make it look almost like a painting rather than a colored coloring page. But there we have it, everyone. That is my entire coloring supply collection. Whew, my voice is feeling tired, but I had so much fun just yapping about coloring supplies with you today. However, I have a little secret to share with you all. This is technically not all of the coloring supplies within my collection. I recently received a bunch of goodies, but I'm saving those for a whole video coming very soon on the channel, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, happy coloring, friends. Have a good day, have a good life, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!